Welcome to the Unriveted Podcast, where we talk about technology initiatives such as artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and people. This broadcast is brought to you in part by Fast CTO, where results are imminent. John, would you like to introduce our guest?
All right. Thanks, Martin. We have a special guest today. We haven't had a guest for a while, so it's good to have one here today. We have Dan Chuparkoff, who is joining us. He is an AI and Innovation Keynote speaker, ex-Googler, as well as several other professional designations and experiences. So, Dan, welcome to the Unriveted Podcast. We're glad to have you here today. Before Martin and I start with the rapid fire peppering of questions, as we tend to do, we will turn it over to you so you can give us a little introduction of your own. Tell us about your background, your experience in AI, and everything that may be germane to the topics of the Unriveted podcast. So, Dan, take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, first, Martin and John, thanks a lot for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. It's an exciting year in technology and in the world of teams. And so I'm looking forward to the exciting stuff we'll talk about today. For me, going all the way back, I was a product management leader for about 30 years, since before we started using that name for what I was doing. But I was always trying to make software for our customers. And when I first started doing that, we didn't have PCs yet. I was making software on a mainframe. And then we got PCs and it changed the way we made customers value. And then we got the internet and that changed it again. And then we got mobile and then we got cloud and then we got data science and then we got remote work and it changed the way we collaborated. And now we have AI. And so from my perspective, it's just one more of those plateau change things that our teams are going through. So I take the 6 transformations that I helped my teams through previously, and I take the lessons I learned from that and help teams apply that stuff to AI now. And so we'll dig into all of that now.
That's awesome, Dan, and thank you. I actually started my career also in mainframe computers. That's so funny. Mine had the word A as an Amdahl in the mainframe, and I'm going to guess yours had I as an IBM or something else.
It did, although I remember when we got a big DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation machine, and that was a huge deal. We did the alpha migration to this DEC alpha machine where we had to change all our stuff from the old way to the new way, the fancy new DEC. Anyway, dating ourselves here, Martin.
Yep. Well, this is also that part about people, and for people to understand for reference, although I didn't do any professional work using punch cards, I did do academic work and create punch cards.
Nice.
And SneakerNet. Don't forget SneakerNet, Martin.
Oh yeah, SneakerNet. That was me carrying the deck of cards over to you to share. So Dan, talk us through your journey. Talk us through what you're excited about. What are you looking to accomplish in this next calendar year?
Yeah, I think so. I left Google voluntarily in September because I started doing independently. I started helping other teams. I speak at conferences. I do keynote speaking, and I'm writing a book. And those kinds of extracurricular things were a lot more fun for me than the stuff I was doing back then at Google. So I went independent, and now this year I'm just going to help as many teams as I can through this AI transition. What I think I'm excited about is we've been working on trying to automate some of our work for a long time. We have algorithms that process data and make dashboards for us. We have, task automation, and we have mechanical automation in factories and in manufacturing pipelines. But most of us spend most of our time in information management. Not doing those other things. We spend most of our time talking to our team members, talking to our customers about what they need and when, and sharing status with our boss and getting strategy. And all of those things have been really hard to automate with software. But now we have this new technology that's fundamentally built on language models, and it has an amazing ability to automate the passing around of language. And that's gonna dramatically change the way we collaborate on teams, especially globally, because it can also translate. Right, it doesn't care what language you're sharing in, and so that this is going to create some amazing globalization and democratization to information dynamics, and it's just going to be a really amazing year.
Good. Yeah, that, actually that leads very well. Good segue into a question that I was already going to ask, and then you went right there. So, I'm interested in your thoughts on a couple of things about this. So, remote working, you mentioned, which was one of the big kind of sea changes,
Right,
post pandemic or during the pandemic. I've been
right,
working remotely for 10 years, so I've been doing it before it became the cool thing to do.
right,
But you mentioned also that, we have people dispersed geographically, and that are all working remotely. So, we've had that pre-pandemic too, but I'm
right.
interested in your thoughts on how do you envision, or maybe how do you think from what you've seen, AI will influence or help teams that are diverse across the world that have to work in an asynchronous environment,
Right.
perform better, or perform like they would if they were in an actual office, and you could just walk on over to someone's desk and ask them a question. But when you have someone who's 12 hours time zone different and another who's 16 or a day, what are you seeing, or what do you think will happen using AI specifically for dealing with remote work and geographically dispersed teams?
Yeah, I think I'll first talk about what I'm seeing practically right now, what people are already doing, and what's helpful, and then I'll talk a little bit about where I think it will go. Um, first, I think regardless of what meeting tool you're using, once we went remote, we started using software like Zoom or WebEx or Teams or Google Meet. Um, And as soon as we started doing that, then we gave ourselves the ability to start creating automatic meeting notes. And I don't know if you've used meeting notes, but I do them all the time. For every meeting that I join, I use Otter
Mhm.
to record the transcript. Transcribe it immediately, give me a meeting summary, capture action items, decisions that were made, and that's super helpful for me, just because I want notes. But when you're part of a team and you record a meeting like that, and somebody didn't have the ability to join that meeting, they can still benefit from the discussion because they can look at the notes, they can listen to the audio, they can skim the summary and see if maybe only 5% of that is interesting, and they can jump just to that right part. So it will sort of streamline the ability for people to be informed about what's being discussed, even if they work in the middle of the night while the rest of their team, is working in the daytime.
Mhm.
So I think that's the first thing. So if for teams that aren't playing around with meeting notes yet, I encourage you to, even if you're not ready to do it with your own proprietary data because of the privacy policy or whatever might be a concern for you, at least do it for things that don't matter. Have a one-on-one with your friend and do it and see how accurate the summary is, because I think you will find it's a lot more accurate than you imagine. Um, so that's one thing as people start democratizing the making asynchronous meeting more efficient.
Mhm.
The second thing is that same thing is becoming available for email communication and chat communication. So if you're offline for 8 hours because you're working in Australia or because you're working in the US and your team is working at Atlassian in Sydney, Australia, where I used to work, um, you can come online and instantly see an AI chat of all the stuff you missed. And that's helpful too. So you don't have to check out 85 different Slack channels and try to figure out, like, read every single thread. And people are also talking about, whatever the lunch they just had, and, important stuff and non-important stuff mixed together. And AI will help us sort through all that noise to help us find the signal. And I think that would be really helpful.
So
Absolutely. No,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's funny. You're talking to people that use these tools, and I have my note taker also, and I'm not going to promote the brand name, but it has a .ai in its service name,
Yep.
and it has some meeting insights, and I can query against it like it's a large language model, and dig through things and find insights that I didn't expect, which is hugely valuable. So
Mhm.
I don't, I've been working in and out of venture firms and investment professionals for a few decades, and I have reams and reams of books. They're numbered pages. I sign it. Um, I track it. I just take these and let's just toss them now.
Right.
Oops, see, there we go. So, you know, I'm so done with that. But there are people that don't want to be recorded, and I go in and I said, "You're just saving me." So I have that notebook here so I can write for the people
Right.
that don't want to be recorded.
Yeah, it's certainly good. There's going to be a spectrum of people's comfort with that, right? We see the same thing just with browser cookies and the browser debate, right? That kind of thing is going to be a normal part of society. So we will see all of these tools are still in their early phases of life, but ultimately people should have the choice. Like, is this meeting going to be recorded? Are we all okay with that? Is that the standard? When a topic is very proprietary or discusses like a merger and acquisition or something, like those things shouldn't be recorded. And so, people will need a little bit more control and simplicity with toggling recording on and off, or automatically block lining things to make sure those things don't show up in the recording. And all of that stuff, I think, will continue to improve over time as these tools mature.
Oh, your tool doesn't have hello, name of tool, redact last 10 seconds?
It might in there. I haven't done that because I record everything. I'm an open book, but I just put my whole life on Reddit.
And I got the last four of the social. What are the first? The first seven. Help me out. Oh yeah, and then what's your CVV number so I can get the credit card right?
Wow, nefarious, Martin. That's very, very nefarious. But
Yeah.
you're. um, so going back to the AI discussion, and another point that you brought up, Dan, that I think is worth discussing or get your opinion on at least, is the there's the point that we're at right now. This isn't necessarily new, I suppose. We've had AI, peaks and valleys of interest and development for the past, 70 years, I guess, if you go back to the 50s. And, we've had AI winters where, the expectation it goes beyond the reality of the situation. And I've been thinking about that as well, and my opinion, I don't want to influence yours. My opinion is that this AI revolution or era that we're in right now is probably not going to go into another like recessionary period of AI interest where people just stop talking about it like in the past.
Right.
But I'm interested in seeing, kind of what your opinion is on that. Do you think that there's nowhere to go but up and continuing the development of AI, whatever it looks like in the future, which will probably be beyond what we call AI now, which is essentially mostly LLMs or LLM driven applications. Do you think we have another AI winter in the future, or that, it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out?
I think that I have two answers to the question. First, I think fundamentally the world has tasted something that is really interesting, and chat based search, like chat assistants, general purpose question asking things are probably not going away, right? That's going to be here to stay. People are addicted to them now. And what used to be search is gradually changing to something that's more dynamic and less keyword focused, right? And that I think will just continue to develop. But second, I think one of the problems is the word AI is really general. It means a lot of different things, right? Like to some of my scientist friends at Google, it means something extremely technical, right? And then to my mom, it means a chat assistant that I can ask questions to. But both of those people are using the word AI, and that's problematic because we didn't actually ever go through an AI winter. It's just we were talking about one kind of AI before, and then we were waiting for a new kind of AI to get invented, and then it did. Or we were waiting on language models to get medium and then large, and then they would be more broadly useful. There's an analogy that I use to describe that. I was talking a couple of years ago. I was talking to Carl Bass, who was the CEO of Autodesk back then, and he said, "People don't say robot," and I was like, "I mean, I've heard him say it. That can't be true." And he said, "No, what I mean is, robot is the word people use in science fiction and in hype cycles. As soon as we give a robot a specific job to do, we give it a different name. Like an ATM is not a robot bank teller, but it is, right? And so part of the problem is, the robot revolution has been lingering for years and years and years and will continue to, because robot isn't specific enough. And digital transformations linger for years and years and years and maybe often fail because digital isn't specific enough. AI also isn't specific enough. And so, we'll talk about language models, we'll talk about chat assistants, we'll talk about image generation. And if we talk about each of those things individually, then there won't be winters and it won't be confusing about whether it's here or not here, I think.
Right. That's and actually that's a great segue into another question. I hope you don't mind, Martin. I'm commandeering. Dan is just throwing him over home plate here, going right into my train of thought. So I wanted to ask you about similar, I guess, question about robots.
Yeah.
And this is in reference to a blog post that I read on your website. And actually, the reason that I started reading it was because it's called "There's a Massive Opportunity Waiting for Michigan." So I'm sure you're familiar with that. I was interested because I am from Indiana originally, and my parents now live in Southwest Michigan. So I had to see what it was about. And then I saw AI in there. So, the article is generally about having AI driven, again, we're using that term generally,
right.
But to quote from your blog, AI generated code will facilitate the creation of a massive market of robot skills, making it possible for a single robot in our homes or in hospitals or in restaurants to complete a near infinite amount of tasks. So I'm very interested because I haven't really thought of that outside of, I have a Roomba that sometimes makes sounds in the middle of the night. I don't know what it's doing, dreaming, I guess, maybe.
Yep.
But I'm interested in talking a little bit more about, your vision of how, the house of the future, right? We've had videos since, I think Westinghouse had like the electrified house of the future back in the 50s. And, we're still looking forward to that. But what do you think about the robotic enterprise within the average household of the future and kind of what that will look like?
Yes. So I do think that future is going to be interesting and amazing. And I think it's going to come more quickly than most people realize. Right now, making a robot that doesn't fall over is hard, right? And people are spending a lot of time, Boston Dynamics and whoever, Honda or Nissan, everyone's making robots. But making them just navigate the world is hard. And then once they can do that, then you have to figure out, like, how do you get them to fold sheets? That's hard, right? That's a massive programming challenge just on its own. And so if I'm trying to imagine Boston Dynamics trying to make a robot that can mow my lawn and cook me stir fry and fold my socks, that's
Dan, no. You do not need to fold your socks. Do not need, you can roll your socks. You can do the old tuck them in each other into like a ball, but you never need to fold your socks.
all right. We'll agree to disagree on this one, Mark. But my point is, if you imagine a single company trying to make a robot that can do all those things, it won't come out for 45 more years because that's just a massive programming challenge. But then if you, instead of imagining it like that, you imagine that like Apple builds a robot, and instead of trying to make the lawn mowing task and the stir fry task and the sock folding task, they just make an app store. And then any developer that wants to build a single task can build one task with this open API to make the robot work. And then all of a sudden you get millions of developers all over the place, building a single robot task and a skill and monetizing it on the App Store. And I think that will materialize. That will start to make this feature scale. Also, though, now AI can generate code as well. So even generating that one task is not as hard. We'll get some code. We need to prime the pump a little bit, right? Because there's not enough robot task training data. But as soon as a few people start doing it, then it'll start to snowball. And I think we'll, there's some reason why major technological changes happen every 5 years. I don't know exactly what that is. I think it has to do with it doesn't matter because I don't have.
It has a lot to do with interest rates, Dan.
Probably that. But I think that 2025 is the AI, transition when AI becomes just used commonplace on every team. And I think 2030 is the time when robotics becomes commonplace on most teams and in our homes.
And to that, I stand by my interest rate declaration because we're expecting interest rates to drop within the next calendar year.
All right. Well, there you go.
You've seen a few cycles yourself.
Right.
If you had to give advice to someone new coming out of school these days and from your own eyes, what would you give them as advice today to kickstart their early career?
I think I was just talking to somebody else a little bit ago. I have two 22-year-old sons, twin sons. They're seniors in college right now. And, I'm trying to figure out how to give them advice, help them navigate the future. And they're fine. Like they navigate the future by looking at YouTube and Instagram and like paying attention to what all their friends are doing. And it's just normal for them to observe the world around them and pick the things they like and run with it. I worry a lot more about the 42-year-old middle manager that still has 18 years of career left or 20 or 23 and went to school 20 years ago to learn a skill that might not still be necessary in 10 or 15 years. I worry a lot more about that segment in the middle because they're not used to just going on YouTube and learn about ERPs today, learn about AI, learn about the difference between blah, blah, blah. Right. That's a massive problem that I'm hopeful that we can help people through that change, but I worry a lot more about the middle-aged people than the younger ones.
Good. Yeah, that's a good point. And this might be a great place and to start on the wrap here. And John, unless you have one more question to pop in, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'll give you one more question, but I wanted to follow up on the education piece. I think that's totally, my thoughts too. And I can say that just in the past year, ever since Chat GPT came out, which has been over a year now, the development of language models, AI, LLM application development tools like LangChain or Flowwise, which I think just sits on top of has been so mind-numbingly rapid that, I mean, I myself have experienced anxiety from it because I'm like, how am I supposed to keep track of everything that's happening? It doesn't stop. And,
Right.
you're peppered with articles like, oh, Claude 2 versus Gemini Pro and blah. And then you have 1,000 different benchmarks. So I think, to the education piece, the traditional education structure, at least that we have in the US, might need to change. It might fall more on businesses that need to invest more in, continuous training of their employees at all levels,
Right.
not just like real estate agents or insurance agents that need continuing education credits to keep their licensing. I think it's going to be every business of a certain size needs to guarantee as a benefit, like we would think of getting health insurance or getting a 401k match is like part of the benefit structure is now you get this education as well that will keep you relevant to our business or to wherever you happen to go. So that's a question. That's a whole other discussion. We could go off on a tangent. The last question I wanted to ask you is one that I've asked in our past couple of interviews on here. Where do you think how do you think the next level of moving from what we call AI today to moving to like artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, where these systems, are seen as more intelligent than humans? Do you think it's bigger models, like bigger LLMs? Because the LLMs just keep growing in size, which is not sustainable, I don't think.
Right.
Or is it going to be a fundamental sea change or new innovation or a new technology where we don't even use like large artificial neural networks in transformer models anymore? What do you think is going to tip the scale to saying all of a sudden now our trajectory from going like this is going to go exponentially higher? That makes sense.
Yes. I think that the obstacle between us and general intelligence is a data capture problem, not an algorithmic one. Like, imagine I have a robot in my house and I tell it, I like variety. I want you to paint my house every month, but make sure it's one of my favorite colors. The first thing it would say is, what's your favorite color? I'm like, you'll figure it out. You'll be fine. It cannot know that, right? It can't ever. There's no way it will know my favorite colors because that's not stored in any database. It won't be. It's not going to ever be part of training data. And there are trillions of things that are in our heads and not in databases. And so the gap between us and artificial general intelligence is not bigger LLMs or bigger training data or more compute power. It's data capture. And we don't want more. I mean, we could all get neural net and give Elon Musk our thoughts, right? But we don't even want browser cookies, right? So it's just not, we're not going to have all the information necessary to train algorithms they will be capable of general intelligence, but they will be bottlenecked by the training data, I think.
Good. Well, that's been a really good wrap up, Dan. And I think to that point, the future is bright, but not so scary. Right. That's one way I look at it. I don't think it's so scary, and I look forward to it. And so on behalf of John and I, the Unriveted team here, we really want to thank you for being on the podcast with us. And we hope to have you back again in the future.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was great talking to both of you. Love the podcast and looking forward to collaborating in some way in the future. Let me know if I can be helpful. I'm easy to Google. You can find me on the internet pretty easily. So let me know how I can be helpful in the future.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, guys.